Hi patrons, welcome to another video. Thank you again for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Today I've got a really good video for you. I really enjoyed making this piece. It's probably one of my favorites so far. Probably always say that for every single video, but definitely this one was very inspiring for me. So here you can see me with the primer brush that I've got in my brush pack, just scribbling around using the Ghost in the Machine color palette there. And again, like with most of my paintings, I just start out just scribbling. I sort of set the base for a horizon, and I use that kind of orangey color there as a sort of to get the feel for a sunset. And then after scribbling around for a while, I started to see a bike forming, and I just used that as inspiration and kind of went with it. Once I sort of saw where everything was moving, I'm not good enough just to paint a bike by itself, at least not at the moment. So I jumped over to Adobe Stock and I got this motorbike picture here. And I trawled through quite a lot of images actually before I found one that could kind of fit the perspective that I was working with, and also get the kind of posture of the character as well, which I still had to modify a little bit. So I brought that in and skewed it and distorted it a little bit to match a little bit closer the perspective I was going for. And here I am just using the angled brush now, just painting over the top. For a while, actually, it took me quite a while, should I say, to get that leg right. You can see even later on in the piece, I'm still messing around with it. There's just something that didn't feel right about it, something quite 2D about it. So I kept coming back to it. One thing I've started to learn is when you paint something and you're struggling with it, the best thing to do is just move to a different part of the canvas and start focusing elsewhere. And then the answers might come to you a little bit later, rather than fiddling so much that you end up overdoing it or overpainting it, or even painting yourself into a corner, which you can't get out of, which is... It's not very easy to do in digital art, but it is possible. So you can see now I'm just using that the flat brush, the hard flat brush, to create those sort of speeding by buildings. So there's sort of the glowing lights that are sort of flashing by, and it works really well actually. The only problem is I think the gold felt a bit too strong. And it really reminded me of, I live over here in the UK, so it really reminded me of the Houses of Parliament. So it was not really what I was going for. And you'll see later on, I start to tone those colours down quite a bit. There you can see I've added Mido, the cat, on Anya's shoulder. Gripping on, not gripping on for dear life, but looks quite confident there, perched upon her shoulder. There's an image of my wife. So I was really struggling with the perspective of the face, and so what I did is I got my wife to sit on the chair, and I tried to take the photograph from a pretty much similar position, see if it would help me with the shading and the sort of the position of the features. It kind of did, but then it kind of didn't, and you'll see again. Talking back about overdoing it, I tended to really overwork the face for quite a while, and to the point where I just thought, right, I've just got to leave it alone for a bit and come back to it. And eventually it did come to me. Not exactly how I wanted, not perfect, but it did come to me. You see here, I'm applying the features now, so I'm getting the lips and the eyes and things like that in. But one thing I've been really keen to do now, partly because I'm doing these speed painting drawings, but also just for discipline, I don't want to zoom in when applying fine detail. And I think I spoke about this on a previous video. The problem with me in the past with zooming in and applying that fine detail is I lose perspective of the whole piece. So I'll apply loads and loads of detail and then zoom back out and realize it was sort of a pointless thing, because people aren't going to appreciate or see that kind of detail, and I end up actually overworking one area of the piece and losing that abstract feel. It was quite tedious though, trying to paint these tiny details from a distance, but I stuck with it, and actually it was a technique that I started to realize it wasn't about trying to paint in fine details, it was about being quite rough and quite bold with it, and it did eventually work out. Here you can see I've returned to the foot. We were messing around with the leg a little bit as well later on. Somehow, I don't know if it's just luck, but or whether cats are just easy to draw, but I always seem to get the posture of the cat fairly right quite quickly. I don't seem to overdo it, and I think partly because the cat's black in this respect, so the values, there's not many very different differences between the values because the fur is quite dark, and again, it's a cat. It's a very small creature. There's not a lot of I'm not doing close-ups of the cat, should I say, and so there's not a lot of fine detail that I need to sort of fuss around. Whereas with the Anya, her character, she's a big human being. Particularly in this picture, she's taken up most of the composition, so a lot of effort's going in to get all the little bits and bobs right. The bike, because of the technique of bringing that picture in, sort of using that matte painting concept art approach, was very easy just to get in there. And actually, once I'd then removed the image, I'd sort of got a base for it, and then you'll see later I bring the bike back into it to get those finer details of the engine. So I think I'm doing here. So you can see I bring it so I keep jumping backwards and forwards, and then I mask it, and then I'm just brushing back in the finer details. So I don't want it to be the whole bike. I just want the little bits of the engine and things like that just to reappear, and then I'm just painting over it again with that angled brush. Keep pressing I've got the Alt key attached to my pen, so I can keep tapping and choosing different colours, and using that to blend the highlights and the shadows. Here you can see in the background I'm playing with the background colours of the buildings, trying to stick to my original colour palette here, but over a bit of time it starts to get very murky. It gets a little bit too garish and colourful in the background, and one thing I kind of noticed is that the character was losing its definition and you couldn't really make it out anymore. So I'll do correct that later. Still trying to get that burning sunset in there with a bit of a darker sky. I think the trick here was actually with Anya's clothes. Both Anya's clothes and the bike were white, so it's trying to get that separation as well, which is another thing that was blending into the background, because the background buildings are quite yellow in tone. The lighting is quite yellow in tone and orangey in tone, and then that's having an effect on the white. And once you start seeing all those sort of blend together, then there's no definition again. So the only thing that's really defined from the foreground and the background is the bike itself. So that took a bit of time really trying to figure out, and I do actually end up cutting them out and going at it a little bit more later on. There you saw I was using the Airbrush Dodger tool that is in my brush pack, just putting it on a colour dodge layer, and then just adding this sort of orangey reddish tone, trying to give the sort of effect of the light casting from the bike itself onto the wheel and onto the characters. Again, using the flat brush here to add lights, got it on that colour dodge mode, and then going into my repository of just loads of stock images that I've got from Adobe Stock, and just placing them on top, trying to get little bits of extra detail in there. I've been using Adobe Stock a lot more recently because I did used to use Pixabay a lot, but it was actually pointed out to me that some stuff on Pixabay is not actually royalty free, and there's some images that have been put up there illegally and they haven't checked it. So Adobe Stock is just a much safer bet. You do have to pay for it, but I think it's imperative to do that. Here you can see I'm actually trying to define the face again by painting the building over the top of the face a different colour. So there's kind of a contrast between the skin tones and the building behind her. And then I'm repainting the face back in, or kind of masking the face back in. But trying to get the shape right was very difficult, particularly at this distance. It would have been nice if I was using something like I think it's the Cintiq or Wacom One, where I can draw directly onto the screen. But I'm actually using this Huion tablet at the moment, which is a tablet that's in front of me. So I'm looking at the screen, but drawing on a tablet in front of me. And while that's, it's an acquired skill, and I think I've got pretty good at it, it still doesn't beat drawing directly onto something, so you can actually get that direct feedback. It's there's a little bit of a disconnect between the hand and what the eye sees, so that was quite tough in trying to get that detail. So getting the face as perfect as I'd like in terms of the shape of it did take a lot longer than it usually should. I'm actually using one of the beautiful parts of digital art here, where I'm using the lasso tool. I think you just showed me a moment ago using the lasso tool, cutting out things like the features, like the mouth, and just moving them around a little bit, just trying to get the kind of shape I was looking for, and then positioning it, and then just painting over the top. And when you're not going for that photorealistic look, it actually works really well, because it's very easy just to cover up those cutting out. You can just sort of dab paint over it. Whereas, obviously, if you're going for a photorealistic look, then you've got a lot of time in masking and redoing it again. So it does work a lot better with this new technique. See here now, I'm bringing in an image here of some buildings, masking it out using a blending mode. I actually use a paint daubs filter on here as well, just to blur out those. Not blur, but kind of give more of a painterly look to the image, so that when I bring it back in, it looks like it's been painted on, as opposed to this kind of photorealistic looking lights and windows. Getting a bit of texture in here for the road as well soon, and tiny little bit of detail for that, sort of like a gate that's running past. And pretty much there. And that's it. So I hope you like this video, and I hope you like the painting as well. It is available to download. Okay, thanks guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again on the next one.